Hey guys, welcome to Knockers on the Bottom. I'm your host, Jay Miller if you like. So let's get into it. So the Cowboys made their final 53-man roster, although, like I've been hinting at before, it's not final. The Cowboys definitely will make moves in the coming days to make changes to their 53-man roster, but they have to have the roster set for 24 hours. So let's go through, see what they did, see how accurate your boy was. So first at quarterback, Dak Prescott, Cooper Rush, Trey Lance, exactly what I had. I was pretty spot on here in my projection, so it looks like they saw it the same way I saw it. Running back, Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle, Deuce Vaughn. So I think here I had pretty much exactly the same. I might have been keeping Royce Freeman as well, but I'm pretty sure I had these guys. Looks like I have it pretty much exactly the same as the Cowboys had it. Also, at fullback, Hunter Lipke had the same thing there as well. So far, your boy is pretty spot on. Wide receiver, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Brooks, Ryan Flournoy, Cavante Turpin, of course, CeeDee Lamb just signed his deal, so CeeDee Lamb. So I was 100% accurate here. They kept a sixth receiver as I projected that they would. Not to toot my own horn, but looking pretty good right now. Tight end, this is where we start to diverge a little bit. So originally in my first 53-man roster projection, I had it exactly the way they have it. Jake Ferguson, Lou Skillmaker, John Stevens Jr., and Brevin Spanford. After the last game, I took Brevin Spanford off, but it looks like they kept Brevin Spanford. Probably evidence that they gave him $250,000 in guaranteed money, so they were going to be bidding against other teams. They didn't want to subject them to waivers, so that looks pretty much correct. Now here's where we start to get a little bit away from what I had. Offensive line, Tyler Guyton, Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, Zach Martin, Terrence Steele, which is probably your starting offensive line, barring an injury, and then Brock Hoffman, TJ Bass, Awesome Richards. That's where I stopped. I didn't have any other guys on besides that. I figured Chuma Adogo was going to go on some sort of IR designation to return or the physically unable to perform list. But the Cowboys actually decided to keep him on the active roster. I don't know why they did that. His injury tells us that he won't be back until maybe Halloween, which means they could have put him on IR to return, and they also could have put him on PUP. But they decided to use the roster spot to keep him on there. So that was a little interesting to me, whatever have you. And then Matt Waletzko, that's a surprise to me. But Matt Waletzko hasn't shown much during training camp and much during the games. I actually think he's been very sloppy and a lot of his technique. He's been getting beat a lot, but the Cowboys saw something I didn't. They work in the NFL, I don't. So I can't blame him much for that. Defensive line, also we start to deviate a little bit. Micah Parsons, who I had listed in my linebacker section, but the Cowboys listed him in the defensive line section. DeMarcus Lawrence, Marshawn Nealon, Tyrus Wheat, Osa Odigizua, Mozzie Smith, Chauncey Golston, Jordan Phillips, and Linvin Joseph. I think the surprise here is actually Tyrus Wheat. I would have thought that they would have kept the newly signed former Jets defensive end there, but instead they went with Tyrus Wheat, and they cut the former Jets defensive end Carl Lawson and let him go. And the funny thing about that is during the final preseason game, he actually flashed some pass rush. There was one of the snaps where he beat the left tackle right off the snap with a nice rip move and got pressure on the quarterback. And then, the quarterback threw the ball. It ended up being incomplete. But apparently, I don't know what's going on there, whether it's something as far as medical or if it's something as far as what they're looking for in terms of run stopping instead of pass rush or pass rush instead of run stopping. I do know that they were bringing Bowers in for a workout there, former Baltimore Ravens defensive end, so I don't know if it has anything to do with that. But that was kind of a surprise cut to me, not because of his salary. He signed for the veteran minimum, so it doesn't cost the Cowboys anything to cut him, but just from a talent standpoint. So I was a little wrong there, or a little way wrong because he's not on the roster. I thought he'd actually probably be your starting defensive end. So from starting defensive end to out on the street, we'll see how that goes. Maybe he's a practice squad guy, but he's out of here. At linebacker, you got Eric Kendricks, Demarion Overshown, Maris Leofau, Damon Clark, and Buddy Johnson. I was pretty much spot on here. The only difference is I had Micah Parsons listed in that linebacker group. They listed him in the defensive line group, whatever have you. But, I pretty much had that entire linebacker core making the team, and it looks like the Cowboys like what they saw as well. As far as cornerback, Trayvon Diggs, Jordan Lewis, Kalen Carson, Andrew Booth, Israel Mukuamu, and C.J. Goodwin. So they went 6 deep there. C.J. Goodwin is more of a special teamer, so he doesn't necessarily count in that area. But the surprise here to me is Andrew Booth. I know they trade swapped with him, and they also traded away Nashawn Wright. Now, the reason why it's not too much of a surprise is because of what we talked about with DaRon Bland being injured and being probably out about 6 weeks. I thought the Cowboys might carry him on the active roster to try to get him back sooner, but it looks like they're going to probably go with him on either IR, designated to return, which is interesting. They didn't do that with Chuma Edoga, which they definitely could have, which his injury is a longer injury than DaRon Bland's injury. But, the Cowboys may know something medically that we're not privy to. But I pretty much had this spot on except for Andrew Booth. But I didn't release an updated 53-man roster after DaRon Bland went down. So I understand why they kept Andrew Booth. Also at safety, we had it exactly how we thought. Donovan Wilson, Malik Hooker, Marquise Bell, Wanye Thomas. That's exactly what we had in there. That safety group is pretty strong. I thought Woods might force them to keep another person, and I honestly thought that they might put someone like Chuma Edoga on IR, designated to return, so that they can keep someone like Woods. But they subjected him to waivers, so we'll see if he makes it through and is able to be signed to the practice squad. As far as specialists, we got Brandon Arby, Brian Anger, Trent Sieg. So that's pretty much what we had there. I thought the Cowboys might get a little creative to hold on to a little bit more of these rookies and actually, maybe cut some of their specialists in order to get some of their rookies onto the roster, some of the undrafted guys. But it looks like they didn't have to do that. So I don't know what that says about the team, that they were able to make these cuts down so easy, and that I might have missed on, 3 roster spots. But for pretty much, I had about 50, maybe 49 of the 53-man roster already figured out when we got here. So it's interesting to see that they didn't have to get so much creative to make some of those roster spots. I expect Chuma Edoga to go on some sort of designation here soon, whether it's PUP, whether it's IR, designated to return. But I expect him to go on one of those designations sometime soon. I also expect that spot to be taken up by CeeDee Lamb when he comes back from the did not report list. So that, that's the only spot the Cowboys really had to get creative with. They left him there even though they agreed to a contract. So that's where we sit. So, the 53-man roster is pretty much exactly like we thought it was. Linville Joseph is on there. That's interesting, being that earlier today that signing wasn't necessarily official, but they must have got it official in the meantime while we were waiting to figure everything out. So all in all, it looks like a pretty solid 53-man roster. I'll be interested to see what they do at the running back position as far as who gets cut out there that they might be able to add. Also, will be interested to see what they do at the offensive tackle position. I know right now they have Matt Waletzko, but I would like to see, what happens if another offensive tackle that you might feel a little bit better at becomes available. I know Matt Waletzko has a high ceiling. That's why the Cowboys have been holding on to him all this time, but he hasn't also been able to stay healthy. Between, the shoulder separation and both of those surgeries, he seems to always be on some sort of injury designation, so it'd be hard to put your eggs in that basket, but maybe he's moved past that. And injuries, like I talked about a few episodes, you got to think about those in isolated situations. None of the injuries, everybody likes to relate one injury to another, but it's not necessarily like that. There's some guys who come in the NFL that don't get injured for their first 5 years, and then they have 2 or 3 injuries back to back to back. There's some guys who get injured for the first 3 years, i.e. Malik Hooker, back to back to back, and then for the next 6 to 7 years, they're good to go, i.e. Malik Hooker. Malik Hooker's been great since he's left Indianapolis. He hasn't had much in the way of injury problems, but that's why the Cowboys were able to get him at a cheaper price. So we'll see what happens with Matt Waletzko. We'll see what happens with the other 1,500 players that are being influxed into free agency at this point because of all the cuts. We've heard a lot of high-profile names, former first-round picks, starters on other teams that are not starters anymore because they added to their depth this offseason. So we'll see what the Cowboys do as far as plucking some guys off of there that might be able to help their team. But thank you for tuning in. This is Knockers on the Bottom. Like the video, subscribe to the video so you know when I'm coming on. If there's anything specific that you want me to cover, leave it in the comments below. You can also hit me up on Twitter. It's at JMillerIYL. That's J Miller in real life. J Miller if you like. And then also you can submit questions via email. It's knockersonthebottom@outlook.com. Again, knockersonthebottom@outlook.com. You submit your questions. I like to put them in a mailbag format and make it a regular thing. So please, please, please send them. I love you guys. This has been Knockers on the Bottom. Until next time, I'm your host, J Mill. J Miller if you like. Peace.